My workout partner nearly injured me and told staff I was triggering his condition by spotting him. The barbell was 3 inches from my throat when I realized Nathan Riggs wasn't going to catch it. His hand stayed locked on his phone, scrolling through something while 315 pounds of iron descended toward my windpipe. I screamed his name. Nothing. My arms were already shaking from the previous set, and the weight was moving faster now, pulled by gravity and my failing strength. At the last possible second, I jerked my head sideways and let the bar crash onto the safety rack with a sound like a car accident. The entire gym went silent. When I sat up, gasping, Nathan was staring at me with this weird smile, like he'd just watched something funny happen to someone else. "Dude," I said, my voice shaking. "What the hell?" He blinked slowly, then tucked his phone into his pocket. "You're supposed to be able to handle that weight on your own, Alex. I thought you were stronger than that." My hands wouldn't stop trembling as I stood up. We'd been lifting together for 8 months, and he'd never done anything like this before. I met Nathan at Iron Valley Fitness back in May. I'd been going there for about a year, usually training alone, when he approached me during a deadlift session. He was built like someone who'd been serious about lifting for years, thick shoulders, defined arms, the kind of physique that came from consistency and discipline. He told me he was looking for a regular training partner, someone who could push him, and vice versa. I was 26, working as a software engineer, and honestly, just happy to have someone to spot for. Nathan said he was 29, worked in finance, and had recently moved to the area from somewhere out west. He seemed normal, friendly. We fell into a routine pretty quickly. Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings at 6, Saturday afternoons. He was intense about his training, meticulous about form, and he pushed me harder than I'd ever pushed myself. Within a month, I'd added 20 pounds to my bench press and 15 to my squat. I trusted him completely. That's what made everything that came after so much worse. The first weird thing happened about 3 weeks before the barbell incident. We were doing incline bench press, and I was spotting Nathan through his 4th set. He was struggling with the last rep, the bar moving slower and slower, so I reached down to help guide it up. Standard spotting procedure. But the second my fingers touched the bar, he dropped it. Just let go completely. I barely managed to catch it before it crushed his chest, my back screaming as I curled the weight up and racked it. "Jesus, Nathan!" I shouted. "What happened?" He sat up, breathing hard, and looked at me with this strange expression. Blank, almost disconnected. "You startled me," he said quietly. "I didn't expect you to touch the bar." I stared at him. "That's what spotting is. You know that." He nodded, but something in his eyes seemed off. Distant. "I know. Sorry. I have this thing sometimes. When people touch me unexpectedly, I can't control my reactions." I told myself it was nothing. Everyone has their quirks. But I noticed he avoided eye contact for the rest of the workout. The second incident came the following week. We were doing squats, and I was watching Nathan's form from the side. He was going deep, controlled, everything looking solid. But on his 5th rep, he suddenly stepped forward mid-squat, like he was trying to walk out of the movement while still holding the weight. The bar tilted dangerously, 325 pounds shifting sideways. I rushed in and grabbed the bar, helping him stabilize and rack it. He didn't thank me. Instead, he turned around, his face flushed, and said, "You were standing too close. I could feel you hovering, and it threw off my concentration." I took a step back. "I was just making sure you were safe." "I don't need you hovering," he said, his voice tight. "It triggers my anxiety." That was the first time he mentioned anything about anxiety, or a condition. In 8 months of training together, he'd never said a word about it. I apologized anyway, told him I'd give him more space. But my stomach felt wrong. Something was shifting in our dynamic, and I couldn't figure out what. The barbell incident happened on a Thursday morning in late September. After I nearly got crushed, I spent the rest of the workout in a daze, my mind replaying those seconds when Nathan just stood there, watching, doing nothing. We finished the session in near silence. As we were leaving, he put a hand on my shoulder. I actually flinched and said, "Hey man, I'm sorry about that. I zoned out for a second. It won't happen again." I wanted to believe him. I told myself everyone has off days, everyone makes mistakes. But when I got home and looked in the mirror, there was a red line across my throat where the bar had grazed my skin before hitting the rack. It could have been so much worse. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the barbell falling and Nathan's face, blank and unconcerned, like he was watching a stranger. By morning, I decided I was going to talk to him, set some boundaries, maybe suggest we take a break from training together. I had no idea that decision would trigger everything that followed. Friday morning, I arrived at the gym early. Nathan was already there, talking to one of the staff members, a guy named Corey who worked the front desk most mornings. When I walked in, they both turned to look at me. Corey's expression was uncomfortable, almost apologetic. Nathan's was calm. Too calm. "Alex," Corey said, clearing his throat. "Can we talk for a minute?" I followed him to the small office behind the front desk, my heart starting to pound. Nathan stayed outside, leaning against the counter, watching through the glass. Corey closed the door and sat down, gesturing for me to do the same. "Look," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Nathan came to me this morning with some concerns. He says you've been spotting him in ways that trigger his PTSD, and that when he's asked you to stop, you've continued doing it anyway. He's worried about his safety. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words didn't make sense. What? I finally managed. That's not what happened. At all. Corey held up his hands. I'm just telling you what he reported. He says he has a documented anxiety condition that makes unexpected physical contact dangerous for him, and that you've been deliberately ignoring his boundaries during workouts. He's asking that you not spot him anymore, and that you give him space in the gym. I felt like the floor was tilting. Corey, yesterday he almost let a barbell crush my throat. I've got a mark on my neck from where it hit me. He wasn't spotting me. He was on his phone. Corey's expression shifted slightly. He mentioned that. He says you were attempting a weight you couldn't handle, and when he tried to warn you, you got angry and blamed him for your own failure. He says you've been pushing yourself too hard to keep up with him, and it's becoming a safety issue. The sheer audacity of the lie took my breath away. That's not true. None of that is true. We've been training together for months, and I've never had a problem until recently, when he started acting strange during spots. Corey sighed. Look, I'm not here to referee your training partnership, but Nathan showed me documentation of his condition, and he's within his rights to request space. I'm asking you as a favor to just keep your distance from him in the gym. Can you do that? I left the office feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Nathan was gone. I learned later he'd left right after talking to Corey, claiming he didn't feel safe finishing his workout. I went through my own routine in a fog, barely registering the weights or the movements. My mind kept circling back to what Corey had said. Documentation. Nathan had documentation of a condition I'd never heard him mention in 8 months. And now he was claiming I was the problem, that I was triggering him, that I was unsafe. When I got home, I pulled up my phone and started scrolling through our text history. 8 months of messages about workout schedules, exercise tips, protein shake recipes, normal stuff, friendly stuff, not a single mention of anxiety, PTSD, or any condition that would make spotting problematic. Not one request for me to change how I was helping him. I took screenshots of everything. I didn't know why yet, but something told me I was going to need them. That weekend, I tried to make sense of what had happened. I replayed every workout, every interaction, looking for clues I'd missed. The pattern was there, subtle, but undeniable. Over the past month, Nathan had been gradually creating situations where he could claim I was the aggressor, the unsafe one, the person who didn't respect boundaries, and I had no idea why. Monday morning, I went to the gym at my usual time. Nathan was there, working out on the opposite side of the facility. When he saw me, he immediately stopped what he was doing and walked to the front desk. I watched him talk to Corey, gesturing in my direction. Corey glanced at me, then nodded at whatever Nathan was saying. 5 minutes later, Corey approached me. Alex, I need to ask you to work out in the cardio section today. Nathan's uncomfortable with you being in the weight area while he's here. I stared at him. You're kidding. I'm trying to keep everyone safe and comfortable, just for today, okay? I wanted to argue, to demand answers, to force Corey to see how insane this was, but I also didn't want to make a scene. So I moved to the cardio section, climbed onto a treadmill, and ran for an hour while Nathan completed his workout in the space we used to share. When he left, Corey gave me a thumbs up, like I'd done something commendable by letting myself be pushed out of my own routine. I finished my workout and went home, angrier than I'd ever been. That night, I called my older brother David and told him everything. David's a lawyer, not the kind who handles gym disputes, but someone who understands how institutions work and how people manipulate systems. He listened to the whole story without interrupting, then asked me a question that changed everything. Has Nathan done anything else strange? Anything outside the gym? I thought about it. Not really. We don't hang out outside of working out. He's always been pretty private about his personal life. Do you have any mutual friends? Anyone who knows him from before he started training with you? No. He said he was new to the area. David was quiet for a moment. Alex, I want you to document everything from this point forward. Every interaction, every conversation, every time you're at the gym together. Times, dates, witnesses, and I want you to request a copy of whatever documentation Nathan showed the gym staff. You have a right to know what you're being accused of. The word accused hit me hard. That's what this was, an accusation. And I had no idea how to defend myself against something that existed entirely in Nathan's version of reality. The next morning, I sent an email to Iron Valley Fitness's management, formally requesting information about the complaint Nathan had filed. I kept the tone professional, explained that I wanted to understand the allegations so I could address any legitimate concerns, and asked for a copy of any documentation related to Nathan's medical condition that was being used to restrict my gym access. I didn't expect a response. Instead, I got a phone call within 2 hours from someone named Melissa Hartley, the gym's regional manager. Mr. Foster, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I received your email. I want to assure you that we take all member concerns seriously, and we're committed to providing a safe environment for everyone. I appreciate that, I said, but I'm being accused of something I didn't do, and I'm being punished for it. I'd like to know specifically what Nathan claimed and what documentation he provided. There was a long pause. I can't share another member's private medical information. I'm sure you understand. I'm not asking for his medical records. I'm asking what he told you I did and what evidence he provided that I did it. Another pause. Nathan reported that you've been engaging in physical contact during workouts despite his requests to stop, and that this contact triggers a serious anxiety response related to a documented condition. He provided a letter from his therapist confirming his diagnosis and the need for clear physical boundaries. Did he provide any evidence that I ignored his requests? Any texts? Any witnesses? Anything? He didn't need to. We believe members when they report safety concerns. I felt the anger rising in my chest. So if I claimed Nathan did something to me, you'd believe that too? If you have a legitimate concern, we'd investigate it appropriately. I do have a concern. He nearly let a barbell crush my throat last week. I have a mark on my neck from where it hit me. Is that being investigated? The line went quiet. When Melissa spoke again, her voice was cooler. If you have a complaint to file, you can submit it through our formal process. But I need to be clear. Retaliatory complaints don't reflect well on members. The call ended shortly after. I sat there, phone in my hand, understanding for the first time that this wasn't just about Nathan being weird or difficult. This was strategic. He was building a narrative, and the gym was helping him do it. Wednesday morning, I decided not to go to the gym. I needed time to think, to figure out what was happening and why. But around 11 a.m., I got a text from Corey. Hey man, Nathan asked me to let you know he's not comfortable with you being at the gym during his usual workout times. Can you adjust your schedule? I stared at the message, read it 3 times, then called David. They're trying to ban me from my own gym, I said. Based on what? One person's unverified claim? Based on the fact that Nathan has a letter from a therapist, and I have nothing. David was quiet for a moment. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to keep going to the gym at your normal times. You're going to avoid Nathan completely. Don't spot him, don't talk to him, don't even look at him. And you're going to record every visit. Note the time you arrive, the time you leave, where you work out, and whether Nathan says or does anything. We're building a timeline. Why? Because if this escalates, and I think it will, you'll need proof that you did nothing wrong. I didn't want to believe it would escalate. I wanted to believe this was just a misunderstanding that would blow over. But on Thursday morning, when I arrived at the gym, Nathan was waiting. He was standing by the entrance, talking to Corey and another staff member, a woman named Lisa who taught yoga classes. When I walked in, all 3 of them turned to look at me. Nathan's face went pale. He actually stumbled backward, like I'd threatened him just by existing. He's here, Nathan said, his voice shaking. I told you he'd ignore the request. Corey stepped forward. Alex, we asked you to come at different times. No, I said, keeping my voice calm. You sent me a text with a request from Nathan. I'm a paying member, and I have every right to use this facility during operating hours. Lisa looked uncomfortable. Maybe we can find a compromise. Nathan has therapy at noon, so if you could wait until after that. No, I said again. I'm not rearranging my life because someone made unsubstantiated claims about me. Nathan made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. You see? He said to Corey. He's doing it again. He's deliberately ignoring my boundaries, trying to intimidate me. I felt my hands curling into fists and forced them to relax. I haven't said a word to you. I haven't come near you. I'm just trying to work out. Corey exchanged a glance with Lisa. I think it's best if you leave today, Alex. We'll schedule a mediation session later this week. A mediation session for what? I haven't done anything. You're making another member feel unsafe, Lisa said quietly. That alone is grounds for asking you to leave. I left. I had no choice. But as I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and recorded a voice memo with everything that had just happened. The date, the time, who was there, what was said. David had been right. This was escalating. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. That afternoon, I received an email from Melissa Hartley. The subject line read, Temporary suspension pending investigation. My hand shook as I opened it. Dear Mr. Foster, due to ongoing concerns regarding member safety and alleged violations of our code of conduct, your membership at Iron Valley Fitness is temporarily suspended pending a formal investigation. You will not be permitted on gym premises during this time. We will schedule a hearing within 14 days to review the matter. Sincerely, Melissa Hartley, Regional Manager. I called David immediately. He listened to me, read the email, then said, Do you have a copy of your membership contract? Yeah, somewhere. Find it, and send me everything you have, texts, emails, photos of that mark on your neck, the timeline we've been building. I'm going to make some calls. By evening, I'd sent David a folder with every piece of evidence I could find. The screenshots of texts with Nathan showing zero mention of boundaries or conditions. Photos of the bruise on my throat from the barbell incident, taken the day after it happened. A detailed timeline of every weird incident, every escalation, every conversation with gym staff. David called me back around 8 p.m. "This is worse than I thought," he said. "Worse how?" "They suspended you without a formal investigation, without giving you a chance to present your side. That's a breach of their own membership terms. But more importantly, Nathan's story doesn't make sense." "What do you mean?" "If he actually has a condition that makes physical contact dangerous, why would he ask you to spot him at all? Spotting requires the potential for contact. That's the whole point. And if you'd been violating his boundaries for months like he claims, why wouldn't there be any record of him asking you to stop? No texts, no emails, no conversations with staff until suddenly, 3 weeks ago?" I hadn't thought about it that way. "So what does that mean?" "It means he's lying. The question is why." The formal hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday at 4 p.m. I showed up with David, who'd agreed to come as my representative. We were led into a small conference room where Melissa Hartley sat with Nathan and another man Nathan introduced as his therapist, Dr. Lawrence Brennan. Dr. Brennan was maybe 55, well-dressed, with the kind of calm, authoritative presence that made you want to trust him immediately. Melissa started the meeting by outlining the complaint. Nathan had reported multiple incidents of unwanted physical contact during workout sessions, despite clearly communicating his boundaries. He claimed this contact triggered severe anxiety related to a trauma history, and that my refusal to respect his stated needs had created an unsafe environment. When she asked if I had anything to say, David spoke first. "We'd like to see the documentation supporting these claims. Specifically, any communication from my client to Mr. Riggs that violated stated boundaries, and any evidence that these boundaries were clearly communicated prior to the alleged violations." Melissa looked at Nathan. He nodded, and she slid a folder across the table. Inside was a letter on official letterhead from Dr. Brennan's practice, dated 6 months earlier, describing Nathan's diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder and recommending clear physical boundaries in social and professional settings. "This letter is addressed to whom it may concern," David said, reading it. "There's no indication it was ever shared with my client, no evidence he was aware of this condition or these boundaries." "Nathan told him," Dr. Brennan said smoothly. "Multiple times, according to my patient's reports during our sessions." "Do you have notes from those sessions documenting when these conversations allegedly occurred?" David asked. Dr. Brennan's expression didn't change. "Therapy notes are confidential." "But you're willing to use those confidential notes to support allegations against my client without providing any actual evidence?" The room went quiet. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Nathan stared at the table, his jaw tight. Dr. Brennan leaned forward. "Mr. Foster, I understand this situation is difficult, but trauma responses are complex, and victims often struggle to advocate for themselves until a situation becomes critical. My patient has demonstrated significant courage in coming forward." "Coming forward about what?" I said, my voice harder than I intended. "I never hurt you, Nathan. I spotted you the same way I've spotted you for 8 months. The same way any training partner spots. You never mentioned a condition, never asked me to change anything, never sent a single text saying I made you uncomfortable. And then, 3 weeks ago, you started acting strange. You let a barbell nearly kill me. And now you're claiming I'm the dangerous one." Nathan's head snapped up. His eyes were bright with what looked like genuine tears. "You don't get to decide what hurts me," he said, his voice breaking. "You don't get to tell me my trauma isn't real." "No one's saying your trauma isn't real," David interjected. "We're saying there's no evidence my client caused it or knew about it." Melissa held up a hand. "Gentlemen, I think we're getting off track. The question isn't whether Mr. Foster intentionally caused harm. It's whether his presence in the gym creates an unsafe environment for another member. Based on the documentation provided and Nathan's testimony, I believe it does. Therefore, I'm upholding the suspension until Mr. Foster can demonstrate he understands and will respect member boundaries going forward." "That's not a solution," I said. "That's punishing me for something I didn't do." "You're welcome to appeal this decision to our corporate office," Melissa said, standing. "But for now, the suspension stands." The meeting ended. Nathan and Dr. Brennan left first, Nathan leaning heavily on the therapist like he needed support to walk. David and I sat in the parking lot afterward, both of us too angry to drive. "This is insane," I said. "They're letting him destroy my credibility based on nothing but his word and a therapist who's clearly biased." David drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "I want to look into Dr. Brennan," he said. "Something about this doesn't feel right." "What do you mean?" "Therapists don't usually get this involved in client disputes. They provide documentation when requested, but they don't come to hearings and advocate. It's crossing professional boundaries." "So what do? "We dig," David said. "And we find out what Nathan is really trying to accomplish." Over the next week, David used his connections to quietly investigate Dr. Lawrence Brennan. What he found was disturbing. Dr. Brennan had been sanctioned twice by the state medical board, once for inappropriate boundary crossings with clients, and once for providing expert testimony in a case where he'd misrepresented his qualifications. He was still licensed, but his practice was small and his reputation questionable. When David showed me the records, my stomach dropped. "He's helping Nathan lie," I said. "It looks that way." "But why? What does Nathan get out of this?" David leaned back in his chair. That's what we need to figure out. The answer came from an unexpected source. On Monday morning, I got a Facebook message from someone named Julian Torres. The message read, "Hey, I heard about what happened with Nathan Riggs at your gym. The same thing happened to me 2 years ago at a gym in Portland. If you want to talk, call me." I showed the message to David. He told me to call immediately. Julian answered on the second ring. He was 31, worked in marketing, and had trained with Nathan for about 6 months at a gym in Oregon. "It started the same way it probably started with you," Julian said. "He was friendly, normal, a good training partner. Then things got weird. He'd create situations where I'd have to touch him, spotting, adjusting his form, and then later he'd claim I'd violated his boundaries." "Did he mention a condition?" I asked. "Oh yeah, PTSD from some vague trauma he never specified. He had a therapist backing him up too, some guy who came to meetings and made me look like a predator." "Dr. Lawrence Brennan?" "That's him." My blood went cold. "What happened?" "I got kicked out of the gym. Nathan filed a formal complaint saying I'd assaulted him during a workout. No evidence, no witnesses, just his word against mine. The gym sided with him, revoked my membership, and threatened to call the police if I came back. I was so scared of being arrested that I didn't fight it. I just moved on." "Why didn't you report this?" "To who? I had no proof. He and his therapist had a whole story worked out, and I was just some guy saying it wasn't true. I looked into suing the gym, but my lawyer said it wasn't worth it." I felt sick. "Has he done this to other people?" "I don't know for sure, but I found an online forum last year where someone described a similar situation with a guy matching Nathan's description at a gym in Seattle. Different name, same tactics." "Different name?" Julian was quiet for a moment. "I think Nathan Riggs might not even be his real name. When I tried to look him up after everything happened, I couldn't find any public records. No social media, no professional profiles, nothing. It's like he didn't exist before he showed up at that gym." David was listening on speaker. He leaned forward. "Julian, this is Alex's brother. I'm an attorney. Would you be willing to provide a written statement about what happened?" "Yeah," Julian said. "If it helps stop him from doing this to someone else, absolutely." We spent the next 3 days gathering everything we could. Julian sent a detailed statement with dates, names, and documentation of his case. David tracked down the person from the Seattle forum, a woman named Valerie Chen, who'd had a nearly identical experience with someone she knew as Nathan Cross. She provided her own statement. We found records showing that Dr. Brennan had worked with both Julian and Valerie's cases, providing the same trauma-based justification for their expulsions. The pattern was undeniable. Nathan, or whatever his real name was, had been doing this for years. He'd find a gym, befriend a training partner, create situations where he could claim victimization, and then use a complicit therapist to get his target expelled. But we still didn't know why. The answer came when David pulled Nathan's financial records, legally, through a process I didn't fully understand, but trusted my brother to handle correctly. What he found made everything click into place. Nathan had filed civil suits against 3 of his previous gyms, claiming they'd failed to protect him from harassment and assault. 2 had settled out of court for undisclosed amounts. The 3rd was still pending. "He's running a scam," David said, spreading the documents across his desk. "He targets gyms with corporate backing and money to lose. He creates a harassment narrative, gets his target kicked out, then sues the gym for failing to protect him. The therapist provides expert testimony, and most gyms settle rather than risk the publicity of a lawsuit involving trauma and assault." I felt like I'd been punched. So all of this, the weird behavior, the complaints, the hearing, it was all just to set up a lawsuit? Not just any lawsuit, a lucrative one. He's probably made hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past few years. And I'm his next target. You were, but now we have proof. David filed a formal complaint with the state medical board against Dr. Brennan the next day, including all the evidence of his pattern of involvement in fraudulent cases. He also contacted the corporate offices of Iron Valley Fitness and sent them a comprehensive report. Nathan's history at other gyms, the statements from Julian and Valerie, the financial records showing the pattern of lawsuits, and the evidence that Dr. Brennan was complicit. The response was immediate. Melissa Hartley called me personally to apologize and reinstate my membership. She said the gym was conducting its own investigation and had already contacted their legal team. She couldn't say much else, but her voice was shaken. I didn't care about the apology. I wanted Nathan held accountable. That came faster than I expected. 2 weeks later, David called me with news. Nathan's been arrested. For what? Wire fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud. The FBI got involved once they saw the pattern across state lines. Dr. Brennan was arrested too. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. Is it over? For you, yes. For them, it's just beginning. The full story came out over the following months. Nathan's real name was Christopher Aldridge, and he'd been running variations of this scam for almost 5 years. He'd targeted more than a dozen people, ruined careers, destroyed reputations, and made close to $800,000 in settlements and payments. Dr. Brennan had been his partner, providing medical credibility in exchange for a percentage of the profits. The victims started coming forward once the arrests were made public. People who'd been too scared or ashamed to speak up before now had a platform. The story made national news. I gave an interview to a journalist named Rebecca Stanton, who was writing a feature about the case. She asked me how it felt to be vindicated. It doesn't feel like vindication, I told her. It feels like survival. I almost lost everything because I tried to help someone I thought was my friend. 3 months after the arrests, I went back to Iron Valley Fitness for the first time since everything exploded. The gym had changed management, implemented new policies for handling member complaints, and reached out to all of Nathan's previous targets to offer free memberships and counseling services. I worked out alone that first day, running through my old routine, feeling the weight of the barbell in my hands. Every rep felt different now. Heavier. More significant. I thought about how close I'd come to letting Nathan's lies destroy me, how easily the system had believed him over me, how much worse it could have been if David hadn't pushed me to fight back. When I finished my workout, Corey approached me. He'd kept his job, barely, and looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Alex," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I should have listened to you from the start." I thought about it. You believed someone who claimed to be a victim. That's not a bad instinct. The problem was you didn't ask for proof. He nodded. I won't make that mistake again. I believed him. I wanted to believe that something good could come from this nightmare, that maybe the next person in my situation wouldn't have to fight as hard to be heard. I still work out at Iron Valley Fitness. I train alone now, and probably always will. Trust isn't something I give easily anymore, especially not in a space where vulnerability is built into the activity. But I'm stronger than I was before, not just physically, but in ways that matter more. I know what it feels like to be gaslit, to have your reality questioned, to be punished for being a victim. And I know what it takes to fight back. Christopher Aldridge took a plea deal and is serving 8 years in federal prison. Dr. Brennan lost his license and is serving 5. The civil suits from Nathan's victims are still ongoing, but most expect to recover at least some of what they lost. I haven't decided if I'll join them. Part of me wants to close this chapter completely, to move on and never think about Nathan or Christopher or whatever his name was again. But another part of me knows that my story matters, that speaking up is how we prevent this from happening to someone else. So I told Rebecca Stanton everything, every detail, every moment of doubt, every time I almost gave up. The article published last week, and my phone hasn't stopped ringing since. People I haven't talked to in years reaching out to say they had no idea. They're sorry. They believe me. It should feel good. Mostly, it just feels exhausting. Last week, I got a message from Julian Torres. He'd read the article and wanted to thank me for bringing everything to light. We talked for an hour about what we'd both been through, the strange parallel paths our lives had taken because of one person's greed and cruelty. Before we hung up, Julian said something that stuck with me. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't losing the gym or being accused. It was realizing how easy it was for him to make people doubt me, how little evidence it took to turn me into the villain. I knew exactly what he meant. That's what Christopher had understood, what had made his scam so effective. People want to believe victims. That's a good thing, generally. But it also creates a vulnerability that someone with the right knowledge and lack of conscience can exploit. The solution isn't to stop believing victims. It's to build systems that require evidence, that protect the accused as much as the accuser, that understand manipulation exists and plan for it. I don't know if Iron Valley Fitness has done that yet. I hope they have. Because the next Christopher Aldridge is already out there, already planning, already looking for his next target. And the only way to stop people like him is to make it harder to lie, easier to prove the truth, and impossible to hide behind institutions that care more about liability than justice. I'm back to my old routine now. Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings at 6, Saturday afternoons. The weight room is familiar, comfortable, mine again. But sometimes, when I'm under the bar, waiting for gravity to pull 300 pounds down toward my chest, I think about those seconds when Nathan stood there, watching, doing nothing. I think about how close I came to being crushed, both literally and metaphorically. And I think about the choice I made to fight back instead of disappearing quietly, to demand evidence instead of accepting accusation, to trust that the truth would matter even when it seemed like it didn't. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But when I push that weight up, when I feel my arms lock out and the bar settles safely in the rack, I know it was worth it. Not because I won, but because I refused to lose. And in the end, that made all the difference. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.